All right, so the next step after you have everything drawn, all of the boxes are filled in, everything's kind of to the same proportion as your initial picture. Then the next step that you're going to have to do is to erase the grid lines. So you're just going to go in with an eraser and very carefully try to get rid of all those lines. Make sure that you don't accidentally erase any of your actual drawing. You're just wanting to get rid of the grid. So I would make sure that, like I said, all of these lines are gone so that you no longer really see them anymore. After that, the next part is going to be the coloring. So you're going to be using colored pencils. Now there's two sets of colored pencils that I gave out. Those of you that didn't pay the art fee got something kind of like this. These are not really the best, but they'll get the job done. Those of you that did pay the art fee, they got a set of Prismacolors, which are much higher in quality. The colors are much more vibrant. They're a little bit easier to use just because of the consistency of the color. But either set will be fine. Now, when you're using colored pencils, a lot of times when you are shading, colored pencil has a very specific texture to it. If I have something kind of like this that I'm coloring, I'm not really pressing down too hard right now. That has, like I said, a texture that is very specific to colored pencils. We don't really want to have that for this. So you got to make sure that you're pressing down a little bit harder. We want it to be smoother and much more consistent. If I press down harder as I'm shading, then I get a much more, like I said, solid coat. You don't really have that texture anymore. I might have to go over it several times even. So this can be achieved either, like I said, by pressing down harder with the colored pencil itself, or I do have some of what's called a colorless blender. There's no color to the tip. It's just kind of like a clear block that's within the pencil. I have some of these that can be borrowed if needed. But the way they work is just like what I was doing. You go in, you shade something, then you go over this on top of it, and you press down, and that kind of smooths out and blends that application of color so that it looks, like I said, more filled in, less textured in the end. So if you're wanting to have, something that's not quite as dark in overall color, I can shade something lightly to begin with, and then go over it with the blender to trying to get out that texture. So in terms of value, all of it using the same red pencil to begin with. I have one that's darker, one that's a little bit lighter, and one that's even lighter than that. Now, that being said, these are all drawn on a piece of white paper. So what my colors look like on the white paper is going to differ than what you'll be drawing on the dark board. All of your colors will need to be darker and more saturated than what they would need to be on the paper. So one other difference, though, between the two sets of colored pencils is just kind of their permanence. So if I have the orange from this set, and I shade pretty hard on that, versus the orange Prismacolor, right away you can already tell the difference in terms of the pigment quality. I can still see a lot of, even though I was pressing down equally hard on both of those, this covers the surface a lot more. The other one, I can still see a lot of my original board that look to it. So I might have to go over it several times with other colors to try to get that in as much to get that covered as much as possible. So another difference though, like I said, the permanence. You know, if I take my hand and rub across here, I should probably rub this way, the cheaper colored pencils are going to come off a lot more easily than the better ones. So especially as you're working, you know, rubbing your hand across as you work, you might end up with more smudges using the other set as opposed to the Prismacolors. But either one, like I said, will be fine. So whenever I am ready to start shading, you know, I gotta have my picture here for reference. I want to try to incorporate as many different colors as possible. I'm not just going to have, you know, solid orange on here because it's more to it than that. You know, I have a lighter part on the top from the light. I have a darker part from the shadows on here. So as I shade this, you know, I might start off just kind of doing the whole thing, one coat of orange. But then for those shadows, I might go in with kind of a darker brown on the bottom here. Might go with a little bit of white up on the top here. Now, I'm not pressing down really hard, but just because of the surface of the board, you know, that texture shows up differently on here than it did on the paper. But just for good measure, I'm going to go ahead and take my color. Actually, I'm going to take my orange, and I'm going to go back over it one more time, going just a little bit darker. And so this will also kind of blend those colors together as I go. So like I said, we want it to be as smooth as possible as our materials will allow us. So that's the first part, that antenna. You know, I want to try to match the colors as best as I can. You know, that red on here is a little bit, or sorry, the orange has a little bit more red tint to it. So I might go in, throw in just a little bit of red, kind of make that pop out a little bit more. But then I'll just continue shading all the rest of it until my animal, my background, everything has solid color all the way throughout. So as I work on this, I will also post pictures of it as a progress, but I think this will probably be the last video tutorial for this project. Hopefully by this point you have a pretty good idea of how to proceed. So that's it. So good luck.